I was sitting at my tiny desk, the soft clicking of calculator keys breaking the late-night silence. My home office wasn't anything fancy, just a spare corner of our small apartment with a lamp that flickered every time the wind blew too hard. I had one last client's year-end report to finalize before calling it a night. The digital clock blinked 8:42 p.m. I had maybe 30 minutes before I needed to pick up Noah's socks from under the couch, prepare his lunch, and fall asleep at the kitchen table again. "Mom, are you almost done?" Noah's voice peeked through the doorway, warm and full of curiosity. My 10-year-old stood there in his Spider-Man pajamas, holding up his math worksheet like it was a treasure map. "Just about," I said, giving him a tired smile and taking a sip of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Did you finish your homework?" "I did," he said proudly. "But I don't get this history question. Something about a trade route." I reached for the paper, brushing his soft brown curls away from his face. Noah had his dad's eyes. Not that his dad had stuck around long enough to notice. Still, Noah never complained, and I did everything I could to make our world feel full. "Give me 10 minutes, okay?" He nodded and disappeared, but before I could focus again, the phone rang. My stomach tightened when I saw the name flashing on the screen. "Mom." I picked up slowly. "Hello." "Aaron," came Vivian's clipped tone, full of command and zero warmth. "We're having dinner tomorrow night. Amanda's engagement. You and the boy should be there." I closed my eyes, already feeling the weight press down on my chest. "That's nice," I said, not bothering to fake enthusiasm. "But it's pretty last minute." "You never make time for family. This is important. Amanda is finally getting everything she deserves," she said, pausing just long enough to twist the knife. "Not all of us are content living in mediocrity. You've always been so practical. So boring." I swallowed hard. I'd heard the song before. Amanda was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who followed Vivian's every cue like a well-trained actress. I was the dependable one, the one who paid bills on time, kept her head down, raised her child without help, and never needed rescuing. That made me a disappointment. "We'll come," I said before she could say anything else. The next evening, I pulled into the long, winding driveway of my mother's house in Riverview Hills. The lawn was flawless, the stone path perfectly lit, like something from a magazine. I glanced at Noah in the passenger seat. He looked up at the mansion, and then back at me. "Do we have to go in?" he asked, his voice small but steady. "They don't like us here." My chest tightened. "They don't have to like us. We're just here for dinner." He nodded. He always did that, understood more than any 10-year-old should. I took his hand, and we walked up to the front door together. Amanda answered with a rehearsed smile, her perfectly styled curls bouncing as she hugged me with just the right amount of cold.
"Aaron."
"So glad you made it," she said, then looked down at Noah with a flicker of discomfort she quickly masked. "And Noah, you're getting so big." "Hi," he said quietly, pressing closer to my side. Then I saw him, Michael, Amanda's fiancé. He stepped forward, tall and polished in a navy suit, offering his hand to me. "Nice to meet you, Aaron. Amanda told me a lot about you." His voice was calm, almost too calm, and when our hands touched, I felt it, something familiar, a softness in his eyes that didn't match the coldness of the house around us. He had the kind of warmth that didn't belong in my mother's world. I didn't know why, but it unsettled me. "You too," I replied, trying not to read into it. Inside, everything was perfect. The dining table sparkled with silverware and wine glasses. Vivian sat at the head, sipping red wine like royalty, already watching me like I'd spilled something. Noah tugged my hand as we walked toward the living room. "Mom," he whispered, "why does Grandma always act like we're invisible?" I crouched down and met his eyes. "Because some people only see what they want to. But I see you. And that's what matters." He nodded again and I gave him a quick hug. As I straightened up, I caught Michael watching us from across the room. Not in a judging way, more like he was trying to understand something. I didn't know what it meant, but it made me uneasy. There was something strange in his kindness, something that didn't quite fit into this polished, picture-perfect house. I pushed the thought aside. One dinner. We just had to get through one dinner. Then we could go home. Back to where love didn't need to be earned or performed. Back to our tiny, messy apartment that smelled like cinnamon and old library books. Our real life. The only one that ever made sense. Dinner felt like a stage play where I had no lines. Amanda and Vivian filled the space with endless talk about centerpieces, guest lists, and the dress fitting. It was all champagne colors and imported flowers, names of planners I didn't recognize, budgets that made my chest tighten just hearing them. I sat at the edge of the table, quietly cutting Noah's chicken into smaller pieces, barely a participant. Vivian's voice floated across the table, sharp and bright. Amanda will look radiant in lace. Ivory, of course, pure, classic. I told the designer I want something timeless, Amanda said, sipping her wine. Not cheap like that off-the-rack stuff some people wear. Her eyes flicked toward me. Her lips curled into a polite smile. I swallowed and focused on helping Noah with his green beans. Amanda leaned forward and said, with the casual cruelty only she had perfected, "By the way, Aaron, we decided not to have you as a bridesmaid. I mean, I know you've got your hands full, being a single mom and all." Her voice was smooth, sugar-coated, but each word struck like glass. Noah looked up at me, confused. I forced a smile and nodded. "Of course. It's your day." Michael cleared his throat. "I think Aaron and Noah should be involved. It's a family celebration." Amanda's expression froze, and Vivian narrowed her eyes. "Michael, don't start." But he didn't back down. He looked directly at me and said, "You've raised a wonderful boy, and I've seen how hard you work. That deserves to be honored, not overlooked." I felt something tighten in my chest, then slowly loosen. Just a bit. Later that evening, while the others fussed over wine pairings in the living room, I stood at the sink rinsing dishes out of habit. The quiet helped calm my nerves. I didn't hear him approach. "You're not at all what Amanda made you out to be," Michael said gently, leaning on the kitchen island. I turned to him, half expecting sarcasm, but his eyes were calm. Curious. "What did she say I was?" I asked. He shrugged. "Rigid. Emotionless. Always tired. But watching you with Noah and the way you hold yourself, you're grounded. You have grace." I didn't know how to respond to that. I hadn't been called graceful since I was a teenager, maybe even before that. He hesitated before asking, "Have we met before? You seem familiar." I studied his face. The careful kindness, the patience in his words. There was something, yes, but I couldn't place it. "Maybe in another life," I said quietly, and he smiled. In the weeks that followed, I somehow got pulled into the wedding preparations. Amanda didn't want me in the wedding party, but she didn't mind letting me do the grunt work. I helped with spreadsheets, timelines, and even rebalanced their budget when the florist overcharged them by $4,000. Michael watched all of it. He thanked me often. Sincerely. He asked questions about Noah, about my work, about how I managed everything on my own. There was no pity in his voice, only respect. He even dropped by our apartment once. Amanda had forgotten to pick up the seating chart samples, and he offered to bring them. Noah was working on a school project about ecosystems, and before I knew it, Michael was on the floor helping him build a shoebox rainforest. They laughed like old friends. I watched from the doorway, confused by the warmth swelling in my chest. I hadn't seen a man take that much interest in Noah since, well, ever. A few days later, Michael called and asked if I could meet him at a local cafe. I assumed it was about more wedding errands. Instead, he looked serious, even a little nervous. "I want you to be my maid of honor," he said, pushing a coffee cup toward me. I blinked. "What?" "I know it's unorthodox. Amanda won't love it. But you've done more to hold this wedding together than anyone. You deserve to be up there." "That's not your decision," I said, my voice low. "Amanda would never agree. Vivian would lose her mind." "I'll deal with them," he said. "You earned this." I hesitated, heart pounding. "If Amanda says no, I'll step back." He nodded. "Fair. But I hope you don't have to." He was right, Amanda didn't take it well. But it was Vivian who exploded. "You've manipulated him," she hissed in the hallway at Amanda's house, her voice venomous. "I don't know what kind of sympathy game you're playing, but it ends now." "I didn't ask for this," I said firmly. "I didn't plan it. I'll step down if Amanda wants me to." But before Amanda could speak, Michael stepped forward and put a hand on her shoulder. "I want Erin there. Beside me. She's earned it." The room fell silent. Amanda looked caught, trapped between two truths she didn't want to admit, that I was capable and that Michael saw it. Vivian looked like she might combust. I didn't argue. I just stood there, waiting for someone to tell me to leave. Instead, Michael smiled gently at me and said, "We'll figure it out. Don't back down this time." And for the first time in years, I didn't. The morning of the wedding, I dressed in front of the mirror with trembling hands. My dress was simple, pale blue with a satin ribbon at the waist. I'd bought it secondhand and hemmed it myself in the quiet hours after Noah went to sleep. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it felt right. I slipped on small pearl earrings and took one last look at myself. Then I turned to Noah, who was beaming in his little navy suit. "You look like a boss," he said proudly. I smiled and kissed his forehead. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." We arrived at the venue a little early. The estate was massive, with tall glass doors, chandeliers visible from the outside, and flower arrangements that probably cost more than my rent. Noah held my hand tightly as we walked in. We weren't greeted, just passed by. Amanda floated past us, dressed in a shimmering white gown that hugged her perfectly. She barely glanced at me. "Oh, you made it," she said, eyes flicking over my dress. "Bold choice." Vivian chimed in behind her. "At least it's not that awful brown you wore to your father's memorial. You always have such unfortunate taste." I forced a smile and said nothing. Noah looked up at me, eyebrows drawn together, and I squeezed his hand a little tighter. The ceremony was brief, robotic. Amanda smiled only when the cameras turned her way. Michael stood beside her, his face unreadable. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. At the reception, I tried to keep to the edges of the room. Noah danced a little with the other kids, but he kept drifting back to me. The music was loud, the laughter fake, and every step I took felt like walking a tightrope between tolerance and insult. Then Amanda tapped a spoon against her glass, signaling for attention. "If I could just say a few words," she began, her voice syrupy. "Weddings are about love. And sometimes, we're reminded of what love looks like and what it doesn't." A few chuckles were scattered around the room. "My sister Erin is here," she continued. "She's the strong one, the practical one, never married, doing her best with her situation." She gestured toward Noah. "It's not easy raising a child with special needs." I felt the blood rush to my face. Noah froze beside me. Vivian spoke up from a nearby table, lifting her glass. "To Erin, proof that even secondhand goods can still show up." There was scattered, awkward laughter. I stood. I had no plan. I just needed to get Noah out of there. But before I could take a step, Michael stood too. "That's enough." His voice cut through the noise like thunder. Amanda blinked. "Michael, it's a joke." "No," he said, his voice steady. "It's cruelty disguised as celebration. And I won't be a part of it." The room went silent. He turned to face the crowd. "Some of you don't know this, but I met Erin over 10 years ago. At the hospital. My sister Caroline was dying. She was scared. In pain. Our family was falling apart. And this woman, Erin, was the night shift volunteer who sat with her when no one else would. She held her hand, read to her, and braided her hair when she was too weak to lift a brush. She made her laugh when none of us could." He looked at me then, his eyes full. I never forgot her face. Or how she made us feel like we weren't alone. I came to this wedding thinking I'd found love. But I realize now I mistook comfort for connection. "Erin, you've shown me what love is, what quiet, brave, unwavering love looks like." Amanda stepped forward, red-faced. "Michael, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't do this," he said. "I won't marry someone who mocks kindness, who ridicules a mother raising her child alone." who humiliates her sister for sport. Vivian stood too, her face pale. This is outrageous. You'll regret this. No, he said, calm as ever. What I regret is not speaking up sooner. He turned toward me. Aaron.
Noah.
If you'll let me, I'd like to leave with you. I stood frozen. Noah clutched my hand. Slowly, I nodded. Michael walked down from the stage and joined us. Amanda screamed, a raw, high sound that broke through the walls. Vivian collapsed into a chair, gasping, fanning herself with trembling hands. But Michael didn't even look back. He held the door open for me and Noah. And, together, we walked out. That night, Michael drove us away from the noise and lights without saying much. I sat in the front seat, staring out at the dark road, while Noah dozed off in the back. My heart was still racing. My palms were damp. But there was no tension in the car. Just a quiet kind of calm. A knowing. He took us to a small seaside restaurant just outside the city. The kind of place that didn't need a name, because the view said everything. The ocean stretched wide and dark, soft waves crashing in the distance. The hostess didn't ask questions when Michael said we weren't dressed for the occasion. She simply smiled and led us to a table near the windows. We ordered pasta and fries for Noah, something warm for ourselves, and just sat there for a while listening to the waves. I used to come here with my sister, Michael said finally. After her chemo appointments, when she had the strength, we'd sit here for hours. I looked at him, surprised. You never said her name before. Caroline, he said softly. She was 3 years older than I. She raised me more than our parents did. When she got sick, I lost my compass. Amanda came into my life just after we lost Caroline. She was bright and wild and full of energy. I think I mistook that for healing. Like, if I stayed near someone loud enough, I wouldn't have to hear my grief. I nodded slowly. That makes sense. Grief can make a lot of noise feel like comfort. He gave me a soft smile. But it fades. And what's left underneath, well, in Amanda's case, it wasn't kindness. I didn't know what to say. The truth was, I still felt like I was standing on shaky ground. My entire life, I had stayed quiet, small, and careful. That moment at the reception when he defended us, it had knocked something loose in me. Something I hadn't even realized needed freeing. Thank you, I said, my voice low, for standing up, for seeing us. He looked at Noah, who was now laughing at a wiggling piece of spaghetti. He's a great kid. And you raised him with so much love, Aaron. That takes more strength than people give credit for. We ate slowly, like time didn't matter. The restaurant emptied and still we sat. The ocean outside glowed under the moonlight. My body felt tired, but safe. My mind, for the first time in a long while, wasn't spinning. Michael's phone buzzed. Again. She's been calling nonstop, he said with a sigh. I should take this. He stepped outside. I watched him through the glass, his face lit faintly by the street lamp. He didn't pace or raise his voice. He just stood there, steady. Then, slowly, he hung up. When he returned, he slid the phone face down across the table. It's done, he said simply. I told her there was nothing left to explain. I didn't ask what she said. I didn't need to know. Later, we dropped Noah off at home. He was too sleepy to change, so I tucked him in with his suit still on. Michael waited in the kitchen while I kissed Noah goodnight and pulled a blanket over him. When I came back, Michael was holding a cup of tea. Made one for you too. I smiled. You don't have to. I know, he said, placing the mug in front of me. But I want to. I sat with him until the sky started to shift from navy to pale gray. We didn't talk much. Just sat, sipping quietly. The next morning he showed up again. This time with fresh bagels and juice. Didn't want to miss breakfast, he said sheepishly. It became a thing, him showing up. At first, once or twice a week, then more often. He'd help with Noah's homework, join us for dinner, and sit beside me while I worked late. We didn't label anything. We just let it grow. Trust took time. I had built walls over the years, brick by brick. But Michael never tried to knock them down. He simply waited, gently at the door.
Sometimes we talked about the past.
About Caroline, about his grief, about my father, and the way Vivian had twisted everything after his death. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Sometimes we just laughed with Noah and watched movies until we all fell asleep in the living room. There was no dramatic moment where everything changed. Just a quiet unfolding. A breath that came easier. A soft smile in the morning. A touch that felt like home. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to live. 1 year later, I stood behind the front desk of Johnson Financial Services, watching the soft morning light fill the office. My name was etched on the glass door, and below it, in clean serif font, read, Accounting, Advisory, Integrity. It was real. Mine. Not a dream scribbled in the margins of a planner or a late-night thought I never had time to pursue. It had been built slowly, carefully, with every number I'd ever crunched, every late hour I'd worked, and every moment I'd been told I wasn't enough. Michael helped me get it off the ground. Not by throwing money at it, but by believing in me when I doubted myself. He introduced me to a few small business owners he knew through his network, helped set up the online systems, and then stepped back, letting me lead. He always knew when to step in and when to give space. That balance was something I had never known I needed until I had it. Noah, now 11, was thriving in ways that still caught me off guard. He walked with his shoulders back, smiled freely, and cracked jokes with confidence. His teachers called him thoughtful. His classmates called him a leader. He even stood in front of the school to give a short speech about teamwork during their spring assembly. I had cried in the front row, clutching tissues and whispering, "That's my boy," through every word. We lived together now, the three of us, in a cozy townhouse not far from the beach. Our evenings were filled with laughter, board games, and spontaneous kitchen dance parties. The fridge was always full. The lights never flickered. Noah had his room with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and Michael and I shared a space that felt like peace, warm, lived in, and safe. One crisp fall afternoon, we drove up the coast and visited a small cemetery near the cliffs. It was quiet there. The wind hummed low through the trees. We brought flowers, blue lilies, her favorite, and stood by the grave of Caroline Foster. Michael knelt first, brushing the fallen leaves from the stone. "I kept my promise," he said softly. "I found her." I placed a hand on his shoulder. Noah stood beside us, respectfully silent. We stayed a long time, telling her stories about what life had become. I thanked her for being a light in Michael's life. And in a quiet moment, I felt something lift, a kind of closure I hadn't expected, as if Caroline had been part of this journey from the beginning. Back in the city, Amanda's world had unraveled. Her engagement had ended in scandal. Guests from the wedding still whispered about what Michael had said that day. She had moved into a smaller apartment far from the center of everything, no longer invited to the same dinners or showers she used to flaunt. Her once glittering life now existed behind closed blinds and unanswered messages. I didn't hate her, but I didn't miss her either. Vivian tried reaching out a few times. A card on Mother's Day. A voicemail on Noah's birthday. No apologies. Just attempts to return to a version of the past where I played along. I never responded. My silence wasn't revenge, it was survival. I didn't need to reopen doors that had been locked for my protection. That December, on Christmas Eve, we stayed home. The fireplace glowed, soft carols played in the background, and snow began to drift slowly past the window. Noah was upstairs, drawing comic strips with his markers. Michael and I were on the couch, sipping cocoa, his arm wrapped around my shoulders. "I've been carrying something," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a vintage emerald ring, framed in delicate gold. My breath caught. This belonged to Caroline. She wanted me to give it to someone I'd build a life with. Someone real. He didn't go down on one knee. He didn't need to. "Will you marry me, Aaron?" My heart answered before my mouth did. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." He smiled and slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Outside, the snow continued to fall in slow, gentle flurries, blanketing the street in quiet white. The kind of snow that doesn't scream for attention, just settles in and changes everything. And as I leaned into him, watching the lights reflect off the window, I realized something deep in my bones. This family, this life, it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Built not by blood, but by love, by choices, by showing up when it mattered most. For years, I had been invisible. Now I was home,